Good morning, it's Jonathan Barrett with the morning debrief. Current time is 7:43 and it's the 14th of October and it's the last day of the week. Look, quite exciting, I guess, last night, and it is quite interesting. We had those reportings from Morgans. It seems to be that obviously the banking sector not doing, or the investment banking sector not doing as well as what people expected. As a result of that, the equity market came under pressure. It also came under pressure, I guess, from Europe. Europe was relatively weak last night as people tried to absorb, I guess, the stimulus package or the expected stimulus package out of Europe. I think the idea in my mind is to try and grapple with the size. As we've mentioned, Europe represents nearly 21% of the global economy. And, to get this solved in, I guess, another 14 days, I think is going to be quite a challenge. But look, that's the timeline they've set, and I think the market's getting a little bit nervous that perhaps that challenge is certainly a very large challenge. Anyway, let's run through the market. Let's run through just a couple of the closes and see where we're up to. Okay, the Dow we know was down 24 points, S&P was off just a fraction, Nasdaq reversed up 29, which was good. Europe wasn't all that exciting. The top 50 there was down 40, FTSE was down 2, the CAC was down 18, and the DAX actually quite heavy, down 83. So a little bit of concern there. We know what happened in Asia, but let's just get more alignment with the futures for SICOM. See where our local market actually went. Our local market basically closed down only 5 points, 4,231. A lot of weakness actually also came about as a result of the shrinking trade surplus in China. Both imports and exports were down, and in my mind that basically says that the policies to slow the economy are actually taking play. I think one of the most important things to monitor today will in fact be the PPI and the CPI out of China. That to me is going to be crucial, and we actually feel that if policy is correct, they too should be coming lower. If that's the right thing, then perhaps we can see a little bit more scope for some of these commodities to move higher. If in fact it comes over expectations, it'll mean probably more tightening, and that to me becomes more of an issue for commodities. So it is actually a good test, a very good test, as to see how China's going and eventually how demand will be for commodities going forward. Okay, so that's the equity markets. Let's have a quick look at the futures, or the commodities market, sorry. Oil, basically, Brent crude down a fraction. West Texas down 1.32, 84.44. Obviously growing concerns about economics again. Technically, we hit quite a heavy level at that 85.50, and I will show that on the chart just in a second. Going through the agricultural markets, our favourites, corn were down 2, wheat was down 10, and soybean bucking the trend up 17, 1.41%. We mentioned that we liked the grains, but the USDA report came out basically against what we actually felt. As a result of that, we saw a bit of a tumble. We're still long a small wheat futures contract, and we've got stops in there around about 590. So let's see whether or not something happens there. Hopefully it won't be. Copper under pressure, obviously, with what's happening in China, 13.32. Gold down 14 at 16.68, failing to get through that 16.80-85 level, which is quite critical for it. Silver also down 31.83. Okay, let's just have a quick look at the currencies. Dollar index, a small little bounce, but still on its lows, and obviously quite critical there at 77.20. Expectations still are for that dollar to remain relatively weak, and remember, we're still looking for this as a correction. It is something we've talked about in the bulletin and also previously. Sorry, the little Aussie battler there, 101.93, done exceptionally well, there's no doubt about it. Still look relatively strong. Takes out 102.10, then I think expectations. That target we had was 103.104. So if anything there, probably expect things to remain relatively well bid. The euro 137.81, and the dollar yen 76.85. Dollar yen exceptionally stable, exceptionally quiet. and that obviously reflects what's happening out there, particularly in Japan. Let's have a look at some of the equity markets, and the SPY 42.31. There it is, just moving sideways. Expect more of the same. That employment data last night was pretty steady. Did indicate perhaps that a little bit more growth in terms of the inflation side of things, and interest rates futures had a little bit of a move. So yeah, there is expectations there of tightening because that number was relatively good. Okay, so that's the SPY there. Let's see, just tracking sideways. So relatively quiet there for the last couple of trading sessions. Okay, let's just have a look at that crude. I mentioned it's down 1.32%. There it is right now. You can see what I'm talking about. If we try and crunch that, that's it there. That's the trend line I was talking about. And you can see that we're right on it. Once we break through it, it suggests 1995. This is just a near-term resistance. So let's see whether or not it can push through there. Obviously on the back of more positive news out of Europe and more positive news out of the States in terms of the economies. Copper, 332, as you can see that bounce there. Expect it to come back to 320. As we mentioned, more consolidation. The target we had on the top was 360 before things start to turn around there. Okay, let's have a quick look at the economic calendar. I think it's economic calendar just for today. And there we are, a little bit slow there. Okay, Eurozone CPI, very important obviously. We do see UK CPI up during the week. That was a little bit of a concern for all of us. Also, we saw unemployment down. So these are the things we talked about in last week's bulletin, where you're seeing the economy slowing down and inflation picking up. That's a headache. We'll see how that trades. CPI obviously in Italy, and then we've got import prices in America, retail sales, and business inventories, plus the University of Michigan confidence figure, which is expected to be a little bit better than expected. So let's see how that unfolds. One chart I want to have a quick look at before we sign off will be that gold chart. We do have that small position there. I think it is looking quite. It tested this trend line at the top side where we could have seen a little bit higher, but it didn't go that way. 1692 was the high, and we've certainly come back a little bit. So would be a little bit wary on gold at the moment. It did bounce off this area, so only if you have got any stops in there, just move them up to 1640, 50, I think is quite all right. Okay, that's pretty much about it from me from the morning brief. Hope everyone has a good weekend. Just remember that Chinese data today will be very important, and we could see quite a bit of volatility as a result if it's outside expectations. But that's it from me. Great weekend for everyone. Happy trading. We'll talk to you soon.